we lose freedom here, there's no place to escape to. This is the last stand on earth. And this idea that government is beholden to the people, that it has no other source of power except the sovereign people, is still the newest and the most unique idea in all the long history of man's relation to man. Whether we believe in our capacity for self-government or whether we abandon the American Revolution and confess that a little intellectual elite in a far distant capital can plan our lives for us better than we can plan them ourselves. Man's old age dream, the ultimate in individual freedom consistent with law and order, or down to the ant-heap of totalitarianism. And regardless of their sincerity, their humanitarian motives, those who would trade our freedom for security have embarked on this downward course. Our natural unalienable rights are now considered to be a dispensation of government, and freedom has never been so fragile, so close to slipping from our grasp as it is at this moment. Well, what of this man that they would destroy? And in destroying, they would destroy that which he represents, the ideas that you and I hold dear. Well, I've been privileged to know him when. I knew him long before he ever dreamed of trying for high office. And I can tell you personally, I've never known a man in my life I believed so incapable of doing a dishonest or dishonorable thing. Winston Churchill said the destiny of man is not measured by material computations. When great forces are on the move in the world, we learn we're spirits, not animals. And he said there's something going on in time and space and beyond time and space, which, whether we like it or not, spells duty. You and I have a rendezvous with destiny. We'll preserve for our children this, the last best hope of man on earth, or we'll sentence them to take the last step into 1,000 years of darkness. We will keep in mind and remember that Barry Goldwater has faith in us. He has faith that you and I have the ability and the dignity and the right to make our own decisions and determine our own destiny.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us for the very first virtual Goldwater Institute Annual Dinner. Please welcome Director of Litigation and General Counsel at the Goldwater Institute, John Riches.
Good evening, friends, and welcome to the Goldwater Institute's Annual Dinner. Of course, tonight's event looks very different than it has in years past, and we look forward to seeing you all in person next year and in the many years to follow. Although our annual dinner is virtual tonight, now more than ever, we believe we must celebrate our liberty and fight for its continuation. During a time when so much strife and upheaval exists in so many corners, it is worth remembering that freedom is the one true unifier. It is the only force in the history of man that has brought together large and diverse populations in peace and substantial prosperity under the rule of law. If ever there was a country in the world where unity was least expected, as Thomas Paine observed, it was America, made up as it is of people from different nations, speaking different languages, different in their views and forms of worship. But by constructing government on the principles of freedom and the individual rights of man, unity has prevailed. But now, as it has at other times in our history, freedom is in peril. It is threatened by soft collectivists who, through empty, egalitarian appeals, seek to impose their will on your way of life. It is threatened by an angry mob of thought conformists who seek to silence opposing views rather than seek truth through free and open debate. It is threatened by special interests who think they know better than you how to educate your children. At the Goldwater Institute, we stand up to the collectivists, we stand up to the mob, and we stand up to the special interests. We fight for freedom with the recognition that self-ownership and the right to provide for one's own self and one's family is not some luxury dispensed by a benevolent government. It is an inherent right that is essential to human dignity and economic prosperity. That is why we protect the right to earn a living in courtrooms throughout the country, and why we have developed and passed some of the most broad-sweeping economic liberty reforms in the country, including the Right to Earn a Living Act and the landmark Breaking Down Barriers to Work Act, which allows occupational licensing freedom across state lines. At the Goldwater Institute, we also recognize that hate cannot be defeated, nor truth discovered through censorship. but instead free expression and vigorous debate in a society that values and upholds the right to free speech is the only way to eliminate dangerous ideas and arrive at good ones. That is why we developed the Campus Free Speech Act to protect free expression on college campuses, and why we fight for the free speech rights of workers, students, and yes, even lawyers in courtrooms and legislatures throughout the United States. And of course, at Goldwater, we recognize that our children are not creatures of the state, subject to its control and direction, but instead parents and caregivers, not bureaucrats and administrators, are in the best position and have an inherent right to direct the education of their children. That is why we fight in every possible venue to support and expand school choice, including universal education savings accounts. There's no question that this country is facing enormous difficulties. Some are unprecedented. But as it has for the last 244 years, freedom will prevail. And as the Goldwater Institute has for the last 31 years, we will commit ourselves every day to ensure that it does. That commitment to freedom is only made possible because you are all committed to freedom. So I would like to thank all of our viewers tonight, from our earliest donors and leaders to our newest friends, for sharing their commitment to freedom this evening. A special thank you to our sponsors, including Tom and Jan Patterson. Tom is a former member of the State Senate and former chairman of the Goldwater Board. We're all indebted to his work to this great state. Thank you to our other sponsors, APS, Alliant Insurance Services and Peter Worth, American Philanthropic, Arizona State University Foundation, Robert Isbell and Brenda Burns, Johnson & Johnson, Parson Villas and the Arizona Vacation Rental Association, Pharmaceutical Research and Manufacturers of America, NTG Consultants, Roland Carmichael Advisors, and Western Mutual Insurance and Arizona Home Insurance. Friends, we have a wonderful event with some incredible speakers lined up for you this evening. We are so happy to celebrate the work of freedom with you. Welcome to the Goldwater Institute's annual dinner. I'm John Riches, Director of National Litigation and General Counsel for the Goldwater Institute. I'm also a 12-year veteran of the U.S. Navy. I know what it's like for our military families to come home after serving. When a husband gets sent to a different base across the country, or a mom has to relocate her family for training, it's not easy. And unfortunately, government hasn't been making it any easier. As licensed workers move from state to state, their licenses don't move with them. This means that professionals of all kinds, from nurses to EMTs to engineers, have to repeat training and duplicate testing just because they have crossed state lines. They have to jump through hoops, spend more money, spend more time getting a license to do a job they're already licensed to do elsewhere. For military families, these hurdles are especially high because they move an average of every 2 to 3 years. Even before the pandemic, the military spouse unemployment rate was estimated to be as high as 6 times the national average. Military families don't deserve to face these costly and unnecessary barriers. That's why the Goldwater Institute developed the Breaking Down Barriers to Work Act. It allows states to recognize licenses from other states so people don't have to spend hundreds of hours retraining to do a job they already know how to do. And the best part? It's already working. Since Arizona signed the bill into law in 2019, over 1,600 people have been able to continue their careers without getting caught in the tangle of government red tape. And now, 10 more states across the country have followed Arizona's lead and have taken action to break down barriers to work. The Goldwater Institute is eliminating obstacles for America's heroes and their families. And this is just the beginning.
Now joining us is Executive Vice President of the Goldwater Institute, Christina Sandifer.
Good evening. When he ran for president, our namesake Barry Goldwater said, "We do not seek to lead anyone's life for him. We seek only to secure his rights and to guarantee him the opportunity to strive." At the Goldwater Institute, we work to advance and expand the freedom people need to live freer, happier, more hopeful lives. Tonight, I'm filled with hope. Now, that may surprise you. After all, these have been unusually trying times. But this is not a time for despair. It's a time to reflect on our blessings, especially what our founding fathers called the blessings of liberty. It's a time to embrace opportunity, and that opportunity is all around us. You know, our country was founded on the idea that every person has the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And I believe that even in the midst of today's difficulties, those principles are alive all across this land. I feel it in the passionate dedication of my talented colleagues, people who work every day to defend freedom. I see it in the generous support of all of you, our Goldwater family, without whom our efforts just wouldn't be possible. And I hear it in the voices of everyday Americans, people who are defending our rights, often against unbelievable odds. You know, it's in their honor that we present the annual Goldwater Institute Freedom Award, which comes with a $10,000 cash prize provided by an anonymous donor. The Freedom Award recognizes the efforts and achievements of our fellow Americans, whose perseverance and bravery have empowered people to shape their own destinies. As you'll recall, our past Freedom Awards went to 11-year-old Jordan McClin and former Navy pilot Matt Bellina, both of whom have terminal illnesses. You know, Jordan and Matt had enough on their hands fighting for their own lives, but they bravely joined our Right to Try coalition to promote the rights of all patients. And today, people diagnosed with a terminal illness no longer have to beg the government for permission to try medicines that could save their lives. Tonight, I have the privilege of honoring another champion of freedom, one who is fighting for self-determination in a different way. Kayla Svedin is the mother of children with special needs. She tried traditional public schools, but they just weren't equipped for her children's unique circumstances. But thanks to Arizona's Empowerment Scholarship Account Program, Kayla was able to take part of what the state would have spent on her kids in a traditional public school and use it to customize an education tailored to their individual needs. The results, Kayla said, have been nothing short of amazing. Now, getting her kids the education they deserve hasn't been easy. Kayla's had to face anti-school choice bullies who accused her of not properly supporting her public school. Condescending academic experts who told her that choice in education is a racist notion. And state bureaucrats who needlessly buried her children's educational lifeline under mounds of paperwork and red tape. Frankly, most people facing those hurdles would have given up, but not Kayla. You know, they say there's no greater warrior than a mother protecting her child. Kayla is a fighter, like many of the brave parents across Arizona and the United States who stand up for their right to decide what educational options their kids need. But Kayla doesn't just fight for her own kids. Through her nonprofit called Empowered Arizona Families, she works every day to give voice to parents who have been silenced by special interests and state bureaucrats. Kayla reminds these naysayers and bureaucrats and administrators that her children do not belong to the government school system. No, kids are not property of the state. Parents, Kayla said, should never be punished or prevented from shaping their children's destinies. Thanks to the work of parents like Kayla, Arizona's school choice program has been a game changer for thousands of kids who need educational opportunity the most. And the success of our program is helping the Goldwater Institute and our allies nationwide expand school choice. And now we'd like to show you a short video to introduce Kayla.
Education is probably the single greatest engine of opportunity in this country. Students, regardless of their background, if they're given the opportunities for an education, can thrive regardless of where they're coming from.
For a large number of students, particularly students with special needs or students who are attending failing schools, what school choice does is create an opening for those students who otherwise would get lost in the system to actually get the same opportunities as everyone else.
There is no more powerful advocate for a child's needs than the parents. Goldwater and groups like us can advocate and help promote research and share that around. We can fight in the courtrooms and in the legislature, but really at the end of the day, it's the parents who are able to tell the students' stories, fight for them, give voice to them, and really be the face of that movement.
Kayla is an ESA mom. She actually has 2 students that are part of the Empowerment Scholarship Program.
Every child has unique set of needs, a unique set of strengths, and being able to individualize and customize their education in a way that maximizes their potential to succeed is important.
Kayla, just a couple of years ago, really jumped in and has made herself a leader in this movement, taking all sorts of actions, everything from advocating for the program down at the Capitol, in the courtrooms, going outside and talking to voters, talking to parents, being active on social media through a new organization that she founded, appearing on national podcasts and panels.
Because of Kayla's efforts and the efforts of other school choice parents who have really made this a forefront issue for them, we've been able to have much more success in the school choice arena than I think we could have just on our own.
My crusade is to make sure that every parent knows their options, knows that they are there, knows how to access those options, and that it is available. If they always make the choice to stay, that's great. If they make other choices, they should be free to make those choices.
Kayla absolutely is deserving of the Freedom Award for the work that she has done and all that it's done to benefit students, not only her own kids, but thousands of Arizona families across the entire state.
Thank you, Kayla, for everything you've done in fighting for school choice in this state. And so on behalf of those families, on behalf of the Goldwater Institute, and on behalf of everyone who believes that families should have the freedom to send their kids to the school that makes the most sense for them, we cannot thank you enough.
To say that, no, I am a mom, and I do choose school choice because it benefits my family and it benefits other people's families. And there are a lot of moms that are not as outspoken as I am, and I will be outspoken for them.
Kayla, on behalf of my colleagues at the Goldwater Institute and our friends watching all across the country, thank you for giving us hope for a better future, one where parents have the freedom to choose the education that fits their child's needs, and where all children have the opportunity to strive and to thrive. It is my honor to present you with the Goldwater Institute Freedom Award.
Well, thank you so much. I am so honored to be here tonight. I couldn't have imagined being here and accepting this award. I started my nonprofit back in January, and it has been a crazy 10 months. I keep saying, I'm a mom. And I was thrown into this whole school choice world in January when I woke up and realized that our information and the information of several thousand other ESA families had been given away to reporters and special interest groups that were critical of our program and don't want to see it succeed. And that is what catalyzed our nonprofit that I started with a few other amazing moms. I didn't realize until diving into it that I actually was part of this amazing school choice world when I was a child. My mother fought to get a zone variance for me so that I could attend a better school than the school that our public housing project was zoned for. We lived in Vegas, single parent home, and the school I was assigned to didn't meet my needs, and my mom fought for me. And I didn't appreciate that much until having to fight for my own kids and having so many more options available instead of just, having to beg for a zone variance. I have learned how to advocate for myself. I'm a mom, so I had to learn how to speak up for myself in my pregnancies and my births. My older son, has lifelong medical issues, and I had to learn how to advocate for him in the hospitals. My daughters have educational needs, and through IEP processes, I had to learn how to advocate for them. And it just grew from there when meeting other families that have similar issues with their kids in school and being able to help them find options that work for their kids. I realize that I'm not done advocating, and I'm so grateful to be able to use the nonprofit that we started this year to bring resources to families that they didn't know about. Our mission is to make people aware that there are resources that enable them to access opportunities that they otherwise wouldn't be able to. Because when families are informed and they have access to those options, they're empowered. And that is why I do what I do, and the other families that I work with as well. That's our passion. Our kids are a passion, and if we want to have a just and equitable world, we have to make sure that these opportunities are accessible. And I will continue to fight for those options and for those families. Thank you so much.
And to give critically ill patients access to life-saving cures, we passed, very importantly, Right to Try.
8-year-old Jordan McGlynn celebrated the long-awaited moment by hugging the president. That's a good hug, Jordan. Jordan became the nationwide face of the Right to Try campaign as he battles Duchenne muscular dystrophy.
Just grateful for every day. That's a blessing. And without the Goldwater Institute authoring this legislation and giving us the ability to share our story and to be able to fight for this, none of this would have ever been possible. So we are very grateful, and just from the bottom of our hearts, I just want to say thank you.
He is currently serving his second term in the U.S. House of Representatives. Please welcome the leader of the House Freedom Caucus, Congressman Andy Biggs.
About a topic about which I know all of you feel passionately, the fight for freedom. Government rules, regulations, and statutory provisions encroach on virtually every area of American life. It is so pervasive now that many Americans simply shrug their shoulders in acquiescence to the constraints on their movement, their religious worship, their associations, their speech, the kind of homes they buy, and even their public appearance. Yes, virtually everything is touched by government. Liberty that is curbed, enhanced, regulated, is actually not liberty at all. A government that wishes to limit one person's freedom in order to altruistically favor another person has violated our Constitution. Once limits are put in place, government officials and the people who elect them find it easier sometimes to further erode those freedoms. And once our freedoms are taken away, it is rare to reform institutions that recognize those freedoms without violence. So entrenched were certain special interests and government regulators desiring to hold onto their fiefdoms that the fight simply to allow people with fatal diseases to try remedies that had not yet received the approval of the government were opposed. The Right to Try movement finally produced a resolution that restored freedom for some of the brave people who suffer from terminal illnesses. Goldwater Institute was there from the beginning. I thank the leaders of the Goldwater Institute who fought alongside me in the fight to get this bill to the President's desk and signed into law. I also pay tribute to my predecessor in Congress, Matt Salmon, for his relentless pursuit to get this bill across the finish line. When I took Matt's place in Congress, one of the imperatives he gave me was to fight until Right to Try became the law. I was introduced to Right to Try while I was serving in the Arizona State Legislature. In 2014, I took a meeting with one of my former legislative colleagues, Laura Knapperick. We had served together, but when I met with Laura in 2014, she was no longer a legislator, she was an advocate. Laura was in the fight of her life against ovarian cancer. And her mission was to see right to try passed into law in Arizona by ballot initiative. In the end, her efforts for this cause succeeded beyond everyone's wildest expectations. The initiative passed with 80% of the popular vote in a 2014 ballot effort. Unfortunately, Laura is no longer with us. She lost her brave battle with cancer in 2017. But her legacy as a tireless patient advocate lives on. Early in my first term in Congress in 2017, I introduced the right to try legislation. I worked with one of my colleagues in the House, Brian Fitzpatrick of Pennsylvania. But I worked primarily with Senator Ron Johnson of Wisconsin, who became a good friend, as we pushed and pulled trying to get the right to try legislation across the finish line. Goldwater Institute was always there to provide us with backup information, to combat the utterly nonsensical arguments from the other side. They also provided me with access to incredible citizen advocates, many of whom either were fighting for their lives or who had loved ones battling against terminal diseases. After working for a year, gathering support of dozens of my Democrat colleagues to supplement the 150 or so supporters on my side of the aisle, I wrote to our Speaker of the House the following, quote, "The fundamental purpose of the Right to Try Act is very simple. It merely allows terminally ill patients who have exhausted all other options to try medications that have passed basic Food and Drug Administration safety protocols, but not completed the full multi-year approval process. This bill safeguards any pharmaceutical company that may wish to participate in Right to Try, but it in no way requires participation to begin with. We're not seeking to impose a mandate on anyone. Instead, we are merely seeking to give patients who have no other options yet another possibility to try to save their own lives." Close quote. Yet we met obstacle after obstacle. We had so many difficulties pushing the bill through. But Right to Try legislation had become law in 38 states at that time, often with overwhelming support. I mentioned the overwhelming voter support in Arizona, but in 2017, Pennsylvania Governor Tom Wolf signed Right to Try into law after that measure unanimously passed both chambers of the General Assembly of Pennsylvania. Quite frankly, in these highly polarized times, it is difficult to think of any other policy initiative that has come even close to achieving as much popular support as Right to Try. As we, Representative Fitzpatrick and I, kept pushing in the House, the Senate passed Senator Johnson's version of the bill on August 3, 2017. It was passed unanimously. That should have signaled an easier route ahead in the House, but such wasn't the case. We decided that the fastest way to get the bill passed in the House was to put our weight behind the Senate bill that was waiting for action in the House. By this time, Fitz and I were fed up with the obfuscations and obstruction. I had met many times with farmer reps trying to ameliorate their concerns while still maintaining the integrity of the bill. Both Fitzpatrick and I had testified in committees on the bill, and I had had conversations with White House officials trying to get the president to lean on the House leadership to move this bill along. Our first break had been the successful unanimous passage of the Ron Johnson bill out of the Senate. The next big break happened when President Trump advocated for the passage of Right to Try at his first State of the Union speech in January of 2018. The president said, quote, "People who are terminally ill should not have to go from country to country to seek a cure. It is time for Congress to give these wonderful Americans the right to try." Close quote. Vice President Pence also began advocating for the passage of Right to Try, saying that passing Right to Try is, quote, "about restoring hope and giving patients with life-threatening disease a fighting chance. Let's get this done," close quote. In the end, the House held the Johnson bill and attempted to pass a bill that aligned better with some of the special interests that opposed our bill. That bill failed. With continued advocacy from groups like Goldwater Institute, relentless advocacy from our patients and their families, continued lobbying from members of Congress like Senator Johnson, Representative Fitzpatrick, and myself, a bill that more closely resembled the Johnson bill passed out of the House. In May of 2018, the President signed the Right to Try bill into law. I learned through this process that there is an entrenched establishment that promotes and promulgates the status quo. The process in Congress is littered with political and personal animus that is unnecessarily limiting. The pursuit for freedom is being attacked constantly, and we must be vigilant, always. The Goldwater Institute is a front runner in defending the freedoms that I believe are inherent in each of us, by virtue of the fact that we are all God's children. Our founding documents recognize that it is the purpose of government not to create or take away those liberties, but rather to defend them. It's not an exaggeration to say that the Goldwater Institute created the Right to Try movement in the states and at the federal level. Well done and congratulations. But now we must not rest easy in our beds. We should stand upon the watchtowers guarding our freedoms from encroachment by bureaucratic bullies and government tyrants. And where government has overstepped its bounds, we must unitedly push it back within its appropriate boundaries. I look forward to joining my colleagues at Goldwater Institute and lovers of freedom everywhere in this lifelong battle. Thank you very much.
And I have to say I have the enormous privilege in the U.S. Senate of sitting at Barry Goldwater's desk, the desk that he occupied when he was a senator representing the state of Arizona. And that is, it's an incredible privilege, but it's also a responsibility, because he demonstrated a willingness to stand up and defend free market principles decades ago. And the same fights, the same assaults that Barry Goldwater defended against, that Ronald Reagan defended against, we're seeing resurgent today. So I am grateful for the great work the Goldwater Institute does defending freedom, because freedom is at the heart of who we are as America, and we've got to defend it or we'll lose what is so incredible about our great nation. The Goldwater Institute has been a wonderful incubator for innovative ideas that have made a difference here in Arizona and made a difference across the country. And let me say more broadly than that, the Goldwater Institute has also generated innovative policy ideas at the state level. You know, one of the great geniuses of our founding fathers was federalism. And the beauty of it is every state can innovate, can see what works, and can be held democratically accountable. Just try holding accountable some faceless, nameless bureaucrat in a windowless office in Washington, D.C. The more power is drawn into Washington, the less power the men and women of Arizona have, the less power any of us have. And so federalism is about accountability. Federalism is about innovation. It is about driving great policy experiments that benefit people's lives. And the Goldwater Institute is on the front, leading edge of that for 30 years. Let me encourage you to do everything you can to help the Goldwater Institute. Speak out, use your voice, volunteer, help, engage in the battlefield of ideas, and write a check. Go online and contribute, because the resources you give to the Goldwater Institute help generate good and innovative ideas and also drive them in Arizona, drive them nationally. You need to engage with all of your resources, your time, your energy, your passion, your voice, and your dollars, because that's how together we defend our freedom.
Now joining us is President and CEO of the Goldwater Institute, Victor Riches.
Thank you. I want to thank everyone for joining us this evening. And well, I wish we could all be here in person. As you know, we're all living in crazy times right now. But I do want to stress the coronavirus is just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to craziness. The real craziness is coming from the left, whose attacks on freedom today are now more brazen than ever. And I ask you to just consider this. Even during the very worst moments of the Obama years, which was probably the passage of Obamacare, I don't think anyone thought that in 2020, the mainstream left would be actively promoting a socialist agenda. Yet here we are, a mere handful of years later, And that's exactly what's happening. From banning free speech to the Green New Deal, from massive tax increases to accusing everyone, and I mean literally everyone they disagree with, of racism, today's left wants to impose the most destructive agenda in the history of our country. In fact, if you just take a look at the Biden tax plan, that plan alone increases taxes on 85% of Americans, including the entire middle class. And just to put that in perspective, that's a $4 trillion confiscation of wealth. And that's trillion with a T. And the sad thing is, it doesn't even come close to paying for a spending plan, which now stands at $11 trillion and counting. This attempted takeover of the economy is not only unprecedented, it's happening at all levels of government. Look at what's happened to New York City. People there are now fleeing in droves. Or look at Seattle and Portland. Those are places that have been mismanaged to the point of near criminality. And then there's good old California. The leftists out there are trying to blackmail their own residents into staying by taxing them for 10 years if they even think about leaving the state. And while it's tempting to dismiss these types of ideas as crazy, we need to take them seriously. After all, this is the same mentality that gave us the welfare state, the decimation of inner city schools, identity politics, and most recently, the horrible 1619 Project, a fabrication so devoid of historical accuracy that even liberal historians have denounced it. Yet the education unions, the school boards, and the political class continue to embrace it. And I get asked all the time, what is the end goal of these socialist ideas? Is it about money? Is it about power? Or do they just want to make all of us miserable? I think the truth about today's left is simple. They despise the founding principles of our country. They don't care about the will of the voters. They don't care about the Constitution or anything else that doesn't advance a hard left agenda. And that's why they're more than happy to infantilize people of color, politicize a disease, and propagate class warfare. Divisiveness serves their purpose, which is to remake America into a place where they can take $5 from your wallet, give you back 50 cents in the form of a government program that doesn't even work, and then demand you be grateful for their benevolence. It's absurd. And I'll tell you this, at the Goldwater Institute, we're not going to stand for it. In fact, over the last several months, we filed lawsuits across the country in defense of school choice, the Second Amendment, free speech, and property rights. As John mentioned a little earlier, we've passed our Breaking Down Barriers to Work legislation, and I do believe this is the single most powerful bill anywhere in the country to get people back to work. We've now passed it in nearly a dozen states, and that was work we accomplished during the pandemic. And that's in addition to our campus free speech, school choice, and healthcare legislation, all of which have made it easier for countless Americans to live freer, happier lives, which is what the Goldwater Institute is all about. And I want to tell you, we've only just begun. Our plans for 2021 are even more aggressive. The dismantling of the administrative state, academic transparency to shut down the 1619 Project, and the elimination of government roadblocks to healthcare, business creation, and educational opportunities, just to name a few. So as we move forward, I want to assure you all that we will not cede even an inch to the onslaught of socialism and historical revisionism. At the Goldwater Institute, we will never back down from this battle. And make no mistake, the left is playing for keeps, but so are we. And so are all of you, and so are our friends like Kayla and Congressman Biggs, who truly is one of our country's strongest defenders of the Constitution. I believe this is a fight we can, must, and will win, and in doing so, reject the false notion that our country is inherently oppressive. It's not. This is the greatest country in the history of mankind, and we have an obligation to defend it. And at the Goldwater Institute, that's an obligation we take extremely seriously. So once again, I want to thank you all for joining us this evening. We could not do this work without you. And now for me, it is a true pleasure to turn this event over to Dennis Prager. He's a great friend of the Goldwater Institute and a true hero in the fight against socialism and the battle for common sense. Thank you all very much.
I didn't know I loved America until my early 20s. That was when I began to understand how important America was to the world, and still is. That was when I began to understand how unique America was, and still is. That was when I began to appreciate the decency of the American people. I realized how lucky I was to be an American. I even realized how much I simply enjoyed being an American. America is the only country that was founded not on a race, ethnicity, or nationality, but on an idea: limited government, because the founders of America believed first and foremost in liberty. America became the freest country in world history. I fell in love with America at the age of 20, and given the freedom, the opportunities, and the religious tolerance I have experienced, I realize all these years later that America has loved me too. Hi everybody, I'm Dennis Prager. It's wonderful to be here with the Goldwater Institute. I was a teenager when Barry Goldwater ran for president, and I supported him. And he turns out to have been right. History has vindicated this man. It's not my subject, but I did feel I needed to say that because it means a lot to me to be here with you. So let me get to the issue immediately at hand. The United States, survival of the United States as the United States of America is in jeopardy. The last time this happened was in the Civil War in the 1860s. This is the greatest crisis since then. I have been broadcasting 35 years. I took a vow at the beginning of my career not only to place truth as my primary concern and value in my broadcasting, but not even to exaggerate. Because I just sensed that if you get a reputation for exaggerating, over time you're not taken as seriously. So please understand, I don't exaggerate when I say that America is at risk. I mean serious risk. You see, it is very difficult to build civilization. It is extremely easy to destroy civilization. It's sort of like a building. It takes years to make a beautiful building, build a beautiful building, and it takes a minute to destroy it. The left are destroyers. Let me make something clear, because if you understand this, you understand much of modern history, and certainly what is happening in America now. Everything the left touches, it destroys. There is no exception. I want to make one clear distinction. I am not talking about liberals. I have a video at PragerU. I have an article up on the internet making the case for the difference between liberal and left. All of us who are fighting the left should do that, because if we don't win liberals over to their own liberal principles like free speech, there's little hope for our country. Liberals vote for the left, but their enemy is the left, not the right. Alan Dershowitz, lifelong liberal Democrat, Hillary Clinton supporter, professor emeritus of law at Harvard University, said to me, and you can see this in the film No Safe Spaces, where I'm sitting in his apartment, and he says, Dennis, as a lifelong liberal, as a Democrat, as a Jew, as an American, I know that the left is my enemy, not the right. That is what every liberal needs to understand. Everything that liberals stand for, the left loathes. Everything. And yet liberals vote for them because they have been brainwashed to believe the right is their enemy. Everything the left touches, it is ruined or destroyed. The university is an obvious example. The university is now a Steven Pinker, atheist, liberal, Democrat, professor at Harvard, but intellectually honest gentleman, said the left has rendered the university a laughingstock. Why you would send your child to a place to learn nonsense, unless they had to learn STEM, science, technology, engineering, or math, is a puzzle to me. You are not only throwing out your money, you are risking the values of your child. The number of people I meet with traditional Judeo-Christian and or conservative values, one of whose or more of their children have become leftists and have contempt for their parents and their parents' values, is almost, it's clearly a majority. I was going to say almost universal, but it's not universal. There are parents who have sent their kids to college and the child has not turned out a leftist. But I pity such parents to spend all that money to have your child loathe everything you stand for is pretty much a trauma. The universities have been ruined, the high schools are ruined. They're now teaching that America was founded in 1619, that America was founded, its entire founding was in order to preserve slavery. The left has ruined sports. It was one of the few remaining places where people of all persuasions, ethnicities, races, outlooks, religions could go and cheer for the home team, root for the home team. And the left has destroyed that too. But a lot of people are not watching sports any longer because they've been politicized. You don't watch a game any longer without being lectured on what you should think. I don't even think in the Soviet Union they had messages on athletes' uniforms during the heyday of Brezhnev, or even perhaps Stalin. And yet the left in America has succeeded in ruining sports. They have ruined late-night comedy. When Johnny Carson was the late-night chief of comedy, no one even knew if he was liberal or conservative, because he believed that his task was to give the American watching TV late at night something soothing, something to laugh about after the difficult day that constitutes most people's lives, because life is a challenge in virtually every one of our lives. Not any longer. Just like the NFL and the NBA, late night comedy is now telling you how to think, what to think, and how terrible you are. There is nothing that they have touched that they haven't ruined. Journalism is a disgrace, just a disgrace. Which brings me to the next thing the left is damaging. This is the first time in American history, even including the 1860s, that there is a concentrated attempt to undo free speech. This is America's glory. That is why France gave America the Statue of Liberty. No country in the world's history had so much free speech, had it protected, had the people believe, liberal, conservative, all united on one thing. I may not agree with you, but I will fight to the death for your right to say it. Not any longer. When I was a kid, I remember Nazis, real Nazis, actual Nazis with swastikas, marching in Skokie, Illinois, a suburb of Chicago. They chose Skokie because a lot of Jewish survivors of the Holocaust lived there. So these despicable human beings decided to give these people nightmares again, the people whose whole families had been murdered by the Nazis in Europe and who somehow got to America after the war. So they marched there. Jewish groups, liberal groups, conservative groups, almost all agreed the Nazis have a right to be evil, to advocate evil in the midst of a Holocaust survivor neighborhood. Because it was understood America stands for something even more important, and that is free speech. Today, a conservative invited to a college campus, not a Nazi in Skokie, a conservative like me, a Jew, invited to a campus, People retreat, people protest. When I went to the University of Wyoming 2 years ago to speak, some academic wrote, or some journalist wrote, how can we have such a bigot and racist and anti-Semite come to speak here? Yes, how's that? A Jewish anti-Semite. I devoted so much of my life to Judaism and Jews that it's actually laughable, but it's not laughable because they don't deal with issues on the left, they deal with smears. How can we destroy you? Not how can we destroy your arguments. They don't argue, they destroy. This is the threat to America. Free speech, sports, late night television, colleges, high schools, elementary schools. There is no area of life. The arts. The chief music critic of the New York Times came out against blind auditions for orchestras. These were set up a generation ago in order to combat racism and sexism, so that if you try out for the violin section at the New York Philharmonic or the oboe section, you play your instrument, but no one sees you. So they don't know if you're a friend, they don't know what color you are, they don't know your sex, just who plays the oboe best. That's the person chosen to be an oboist at the New York Philharmonic or LA Philharmonic, Chicago Symphony, whatever it is. Now they're against that at the New York Times, the chief spokesman of the left. It is no longer a liberal newspaper. It is a left-wing newspaper. Isn't that amazing? We should choose the violinists based on color, not based on violin playing ability. Everything the left touches, it destroys. So this is the question, can they destroy America? They'd like to. They want to fundamentally transform the United States of America. I love when they say that they're angered when we say that they don't love or hate America. Liberals love America, conservatives love America, leftists hate America. Let me ask you a question. If you met a man who said, you know, I love my wife, but I would like to fundamentally transform her, would you believe that he loved his wife? Of course not. People don't love what they want to fundamentally transform. Obviously. The United States of America has a belief system. I call it the American Trinity. I made up the term, but I didn't make up the contents. I found them on every American coin. Liberty, in God we trust, e pluribus unum. The left loathes all three components of the American Trinity. The left loathes liberty. The left everywhere in history, there is no exception. When the left takes over, liberty declines. Free speech begins to disappear. There is no exception to that in Europe, in Asia, in Africa, in America. The left loathes freedom. Freedom is the enemy of the left. They prefer the French Revolution, equality. Not equality of opportunity, which we all believe in, but equality of result. To get equality of result, you must suppress liberty. And they certainly don't believe in free speech, as Twitter, YouTube, and Google, and all of the tech companies make clear, and the universities make clear. Liberty, this is what people don't realize. Liberty is a value, not an instinct. If you don't teach people to value liberty, they will not. There are a handful of people in any society who treasure liberty over being taken care of. That's what America was founded on. Liberty, not the government will take care of you. You take care of you, you take care of your family, you take care of your community. That's the American value. If none of that works, there's a church. There's a Rotary Club. But not any longer. You don't take care of you. You don't take care of your family. You don't take care of your community. The state will. Liberty is a value, not an instinct. Number 2, e pluribus unum, from many one. Thomas Friedman. I once thought he was liberal. I now realize he's left-wing. A left-wing columnist for the New York Times actually had a column recently in which he said, e pluribus unum should no longer be from many one, rather from many we. The idea that we all blend into becoming American is anathema to the left. But that is the only way a multiracial, multi-ethnic country can possibly survive, is if we all take on an American identity. That doesn't mean you stop being whatever else you would like to be. Whatever, if you want to be Catholic, you want to be a Jew, you want to be an Armenian, you affirm all these identities, that's just fine. But we are all American. E pluribus unum, from many one. The left loathes that idea. I learned the melting pot in elementary school. That was the ideal. And then the third is, in God we trust. The founding fathers were not all theological Christians. They didn't all affirm a Trinitarian conception of the Godhead, but they were all Bible-based human beings. And they knew that without God as the fundamental source of rights, we have no rights. That is why the Declaration of Independence says that we have inalienable rights because our Creator endowed us with them. Because if rights don't come from the Creator, they come from people. But if people give rights, people can take away rights. This country cannot succeed without all three components of the Trinity, of the American Trinity. Just like Christianity, you cannot remove the Father, the Son, or the Holy Spirit and still have Christianity. You cannot remove e pluribus unum or liberty or in God we trust from the American Trinity and still have America. So, my friends, we are in trouble. I don't believe in false optimism, and I don't believe in debilitating pessimism. I'm neither a pessimist nor an optimist. I don't believe either helps. Pessimists stop fighting, and optimists stop fighting. The pessimist says, hey, everything's going to be lousy anyway, why fight? The optimist says, everything's going to be great anyway, why fight? I'm neither an optimist nor a pessimist. I'm a fighter. And if they died at Normandy Beach for America and liberty, the least I could do is live for America and liberty. That's the vow I took at Normandy Beach. That's the vow every one of us should take in this greatest crisis since the Civil War. Thank you.
Most people don't like the political climate in America today. Right now we have battling populisms between right and left. It's easy to become frustrated by this. You know, at the Goldwater Institute, or AEI, we stand for open societies, we stand for freedom, we stand for the movement of labor and capital such that people can prosper, people can live freely. And so we see something like this and it's really easy to become frustrated, but we shouldn't, because this is a big opportunity. My name is Arthur Brooks. I'm president of the American Enterprise Institute in Washington, D.C. I've done a lot of work on happiness over the course of my career, and one of the things that I've found is that there are really 4 sources of happiness that we can affect. And forget the genetics, forget the circumstances in life. There's a portfolio of 4 things that we need to be thinking about: our faith, our family, our friendships, and our work. People forget about work a lot, but the truth of the matter is that one of the great pillars of the happiest possible life, of a life full of purpose and meaning, is earning your success and serving others. Now, the truth is that the best way to do that we've ever created throughout history is the free enterprise system. That's actually what's taken a world that was almost completely poor 200 years ago, one that was very poor 50 years ago, to one that's mostly not. The most important thing for us to remember, those of us who believe in classical liberalism, which is to say the free enterprise movement, those of us who believe in that as a moral good, cannot be caught up in the populism. when the populist moment fades, the work that we've done will actually be standing starkly against a lot of the realities that people don't like. And that's when we will have done the service that we were created to do for this great country. But we can't let up. We can't let up. We have to support the Goldwater Institute. We have to support it with our time and our talent and our treasure. And if we do that, then we'll be voting for a better America and basically taking our values and our careers and our resources and saying, I dedicate these things to making a better America in my name and for the good of my kids and grandkids. If people really want a better America, support the Goldwater Institute. You're serving your country.
We will now move into the special question and answer portion of the evening with Congressman Andy Biggs, Dennis Prager, and Victor Riches.
Well, thank you. Before we started this event, we reached out to our supporters and asked folks to send in questions, both for Congressman Biggs and for Mr. Prager, and we received a number of questions. And Dennis, I would like to start with you, because one of the questions that we received from several folks has to do with the media. And I've heard you talk about this on your show before, that you never thought you'd see the day that in a country that is free, not that it is not a dictatorship, that we'd have a media that could actually have the possibility of brainwashing the country. Yet that does seem to be exactly what's being attempted now, with complete fabrications being reported as news and actual news stories being completely ignored. And so, Dennis, my first question for you is, what has happened to the idea of an impartial press, and do you think it's even possible to fix it?
So let me give you a tiny bit of background. Incredibly and unbelievably luckily, my field of study, you probably will never meet anyone whose major was this. I majored in communist affairs. That was the title of my major at Columbia, at the School of International Affairs, as it was called. And I was at the Russian Institute. There were 7 of us in all of Columbia in this advanced seminar on communism. And by the way, our instructor was Brzezinski, Zbigniew Brzezinski, who became Jimmy Carter's national security advisor. So I studied communism. I read Pravda every day, the Soviet communist newspaper. That's why I studied Russian, was to read Pravda, not to be able to order in a Moscow restaurant. And I was simply certain. This is one of the handful of shocks, intellectual shocks. I was certain that the only way Pravda could brainwash people was that it was a dictatorship and it was the only thing people could hear. And now I see, in a free society, you can be brainwashed by the media. So I'm explaining what you referred to in your question. This is unexpected by me. Maybe I was naive, but the brainwash is remarkable.
Then a question I'd like to ask of both of you, and Dennis, will start with you. It does seem like that today politics is dominated by polarization, to the point that a lot of people, I think, don't really even have a clear idea of what it means to be an American. Is there anything we can do about this?
That is entirely true, and I knew this when I was in my 20s. I began lecturing. I have a very odd life. I began lecturing at 21 because I was sent to the Soviet Union and started lecturing on life in the Soviet Union. So I remember telling audiences the following. I would look at these people, my parents' age, and older, my grandparents' age, and say, you know, you decided after the Depression and World War II, with all its suffering, you decided you will give my generation, the baby boomers, and I was almost a baby when I said this, everything you didn't have. The problem is you didn't give us everything you did have. And they had religion, and they had love of America. They didn't give that to the baby boomer generation. I'm speaking in generalities. Obviously, I got it, and some of us got it. But by and large, they didn't get it. I saw my fellow students spell America with a K in the 1970s. This is not new, calling America fascist. I saw it at the college and graduate school. As I've often pointed out, they always used to say about Cuba, 100% literacy. They have a greater literacy percentage than Americans. Said, what's the good? If you could only read communist literature, I'd rather be free and illiterate than literate in a communist country.
Congressman Biggs, I'd ask you the same question. That is that it just doesn't seem like there's a clear idea in these kind of polarized times of what it means to be an American. What do you think we can do about that?
Well, first of all, I agree with Dennis that is the case, and largely it's been due to indoctrination from a couple of sources. And Dennis mentioned in his speech the universities and high schools, and they're captured, and that is why the school choice movement is so necessary. If we're going to have just a modest chance to recover or restore some kind of commonality amongst us as a people, it's going to come through school choice, because people can get out and get an education that is perhaps an education as opposed to an indoctrination. And then the other thing is we have to make sure that we can take back some political and protect some political institutions. Right now, we're fighting for our lives in virtually every state to protect political institutions. And if you can't protect them, it's going to actually produce further turmoil, further embracement. We're on a suboptimal path right now. This is all going to require short-term pain if we're going to correct this. But that's the only things that I think can respond to that, because right now we're raising a generation that doesn't believe in God, by and large.
And America.
And America.
Right. Both.
Yeah. Great.
And my next question, and as you guys can imagine, we received a lot of comments from folks that are just very concerned about this hard left tilt that's coming from a large chunk of the country, to the point where people are now openly advocating for socialist ideas. And one of the things I find very disturbing about this is that we know that free market capitalism has literally lifted millions of people, not just in this country, but frankly all around the globe, out of poverty, far surpassing any other economic system that's ever been devised. Yet it is under this extreme attack right here in our own backyard. So my question, and again, I'd like to ask you both this question, and Congressman Biggs, I'll start with you. Why does the left seem to despise the very tool that is proven to be so beneficial to so many human beings?
Because they've been taught that you've got critical race theory, a Marxian dogma that's out there. They've been indoctrinated that we are hopelessly flawed, that capitalism is a hopelessly flawed outlook. Free markets are not free. There's always exploitation. And now this movement into critical race theory actually augments that, where you're taking the old economic class warfare, and now it is a racial class warfare and type of situation, and that it is hopeless, and so they're going to take it back. And I think that there are those who are in that movement that seek nothing more than power. They want power and control, and this is an avenue and a philosophy that gets them there. And then you have, as the old Soviet, and Dennis is an expert on this, but this old Soviet idea that there are useful idiots, and quite frankly, they may be our fellow countrymen, and I love them, but many of them are useful idiots, and they're tools to move to that hard left way, because they simply do not believe in America anymore. They don't believe in us as we are anymore.
That's right, and I'll just add to what the congressman said. The left does not love people. The left loves ideas. This is a lifetime of study of the left. They have contempt for people. The Soviets came to power as communists, meaning we are here for the worker. Workers of the world unite. You have nothing to lose but your chains. The moment they gained power, they killed every labor leader who had all supported them, or many of whom who supported them. The left uses groups to gain power.
And Dennis, just to follow up on that a little bit, since anyone who studied history knows that in places where they've attempted socialism, as you alluded to, the death count has been monumentally high, whether it's been in Russia, whether it's been in North Korea, and even Cuba, which is of course a place even today, astoundingly, is still cited as some kind of paradise. But my question to you is, I have to believe that at least some of these leftists actually study history. They know it hasn't worked in those other countries. Do you think they really believe that it can work here, or do you think that the idea of socialism or communism is so important to them that it actually doesn't matter if it works as long as they can impose that belief system
The
on
answer
a
to the
society?
first question is they say they got it wrong. Oh, it works, socialism, but they all got it wrong. That's the view. Stalin got it wrong. Mao got it wrong. Castro got it wrong. But we'll get it right. And that's how they rationalize it. You asked, forgive me, one more second on the capitalism. That the left does not care about human beings, but rather power and ideas, is capitalism. Nothing except capitalism has lifted billions, not millions, billions out of poverty. It is the greatest lifter of humans from poverty in the history of the human race, and it means nothing to any leftist. Nothing.
And Congressman Biggs, I have a question for you from one of our supporters. And it is this: is there any hope on the horizon of ever reining in the federal deficit?
Yes. All three of us in Congress that think we should have hope that it'll happen. No, I got to tell you, there's always a reason. There's always a reason to spend more money than we bring in. This pandemic issue is now, if we were talking about real structural deficit plus real national debt, our structural deficit's probably $6.5 trillion this year. Our national debt's somewhere north of 30 trillion. And the reality is, everybody gives it lip service. There are ways to get at it. It takes incredible will. But we are locked in a death spiral to the left of this country, where everyone expects government to fill the vacuum of God and family and community. And so it's government. And so they come to the government, and the federal government says, we will give it to you because it's easier to give it to you and get votes. There is hope. I have hope that we will do this because the result is going to be either massive inflation, because they're going to try to inflate, when I say they, the people who will face the consequences of this in government will have to try to inflate the currency to water down the cost of that debt, or else we will implode, because we're pushing probably 112% gross national debt to gross national product ratio. We've got to do more than talk about it, and I've introduced legislation. Others have introduced legislation, but we are fighting the uniparty in Washington D.C. I thought that we would find allies. Turns out there are two parties that like to spend a lot of money in D.C., the Republicans and the Democrats.
Because it's much easier to get elected.
That's right.
Saying, this is what I'll give you if you vote for me. This is the inherent, I'm pro-democracy, but it's the inherent flaw. That's right. People know that they can vote based on who will give me more money.
Then let me ask you both in this same vein, and Dennis, I'll start with you. No matter what happens on November 3rd, we know that the left is going to keep pushing for taxpayer-funded health care. And one of the things that always seems odd to me is they seem to have no regard for the 220 or so million Americans with private health insurance, many of whom actually appreciate their insurance. So my question is, why aren't conservatives and libertarians and folks on our side just simply doing a better job making the case against a plan that frankly doesn't seem like it could ever be economically viable?
Why conservatives don't argue better has been a source of disturbance in my entire life. So it's one of the reasons that I do a talk show and write a column, and and president of PragerU, is to get these arguments to literally billions of viewers a year, or a billion views a year to be more precise. And this is. It is not uncommon that the good are less eloquent than the bad. I don't know exactly why, but it seems to have been somewhat of the rule. Churchill was an exception. The extremely eloquent good guy, or fighter for the good. But as a general rule, the bad guys produce more eloquence.
And I would say there are two things there. Number one, if you don't care about telling the truth and you're willing to lie, it's easier to come up with a short narrative. When you want to tell the truth, sometimes it takes time to explain what you've done and why you've done it and why it's propitious. The other one I would say is kind of gets at this as well, and the left is visceral. I view them as visceral, emotional. The right is much more logical, patient, and so when I go to talk to my colleagues on the left, we have an impasse. They're viewing things emotionally, I'm viewing things, I hope, rationally, and I'm trying to bridge that gap. We can't do it, and emotion is so much easier to respond to than rationality.
I'm going to ask you both just one final question. And this isn't really a fair question, but I want to ask it anyway. And that is this: if you could look out about, say, 10 years down the road, what do you think America looks like? I'll start with you, Dennis.
If we continue in this way, with the left having more and more victories, both cultural and political, then the United States, as we have known it as a free and prosperous society, open, tolerant, etc., I cannot see it surviving as such. I say this, I'm figuratively speaking, holding back tears.
Congressman Biggs.
I also have a bleak, I don't know if I'd say forecast, but I have bleak concerns. I have concerns that our future is bleak. If we continue to move down the path that I think I see, then I am concerned that economically we will not succeed, we will fail. The government cannot continue doing what it is, spending what it's doing. I view our economic demise as being almost a certainty unless we turn that around. If we don't restore faith in God and acknowledge His hand in our lives, I don't see how we survive as a nation. And I think that right now, I still think we are a majority center-right nation. I still think there are a majority of people who have sincere faith and belief. I do think that there's reason to hope.
Well, I want to thank you both very much. This concludes the dinner for this year. So I do want to give a very special thanks to Dennis Prager. Thank you for coming out, and thank you, Congressman Biggs. We greatly appreciate it. And I also want to thank all of our sponsors and all of our supporters. And I'm really looking forward to seeing everyone in person next year. Thank you very much.